Welcome to the Kelly Patrick Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. In today's episode, I am joined by returning guest. I have fellow nerdy libertarian podcaster, Kyle Matovcik. Kyle, thank you so much for coming back on the show. How are you today?
I am fantastic. I'm honored to be back. I've had like a very productive day. In case who aren't aware, I play guitar as well. And one of the most nightmarish things you could do as a guitar player is restring a Floyd Rose guitar. And I have two sitting behind me, and I did both of them this week with very little issues. So I played Last of Us 2. I walked for a half hour, cooked. What else did I do? I did my
No
podcast
weightlifting.
today.
No weightlifting
Oh,
today.
I did lift in the morning.
Okay, there we go.
Made a pot of coffee. I had a very productive day, so I'm ecstatic. These are like the days I live for. I wake up nice, bright. I just had a daughter, so from the last time we talked, I'm sure we're friends on Facebook. So I don't post this stuff on Twitter because they're psychos on Twitter. So I don't trust anybody with pictures or anything of my daughter on Twitter.
Sure.
But on Facebook, it's like friends only.
Sure.
So like my daughter got up at I want to say it was probably 4:15. I'm normally up by 4:30, but I'm feeling a little under the weather. So I was like, all right, I'll set my alarm for 5:45. So that way I can still get up, cook breakfast, dick around, and then go out and work out in my garage gym. But she was up. So I was like, all right, well, looks like we're getting the day started nice, bright, and early. So no, dude, like I said, ecstatic. I hope you're doing well as well.
Yeah, having a good day myself. On a personal note, I've got a 16-year-old son, 17-year-old daughter, both biological from my previous marriage, 19-year-old stepdaughter. And then my wife and I are now expecting a little boy in July. So
I love that.
Yeah, it's been years since I've done the duty you're describing right now. And I can't really, I was there for the whole thing. I was never a deadbeat dad, anything like that. So I was there doing it, but I don't really mentally, I can't really remember even what I'm in for. So until it starts to happen again, and I have to wake up at 4:30 when I think I'm going to, that type of stuff where you think you're going to sleep till a certain time and all of a sudden not so fast. I'm in for, I guess, quite an awakening, but I'm looking forward to it in July.
Dude, it changed my whole life, and I'm sure you experienced this too, and it might be a little bit like out of mind for you now.
Exactly.
But when my wife and I first had our daughter, it's crazy how everybody around you changes. And I don't even say that in like a bad way, but you see a whole different side of people. And one thing that I'm kind of like trying to come to the conclusion of is like, I think if you have problems in a relationship, especially with the person you're with, if you have a kid in that mix, it's not going to make it better. It will make everything worse if you aren't already solid. So, and to preface that as well, like my wife and I have a phenomenal relationship, and like we've only gotten better because we had a daughter.
Beautiful.
And like I see the way, and we're beyond blessed that my job pays me well enough, and our family's around us enough that my wife can stay home. She originally was against it, and now like she doesn't want to go back to work at all. So we're gonna have more kids, but like as of right now, it amazes me to see like the person she is when she's being a mom. And she was like, "Oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it." And just like a superhero. She's just absolutely incredible. So, like I was saying earlier, we got up at like 4 a.m. Immediately she gets up and starts, taking care of her and everything. And this is like a constant thing. I'm sure you probably had the experience too, where like, maybe you were sleeping because you had to go to work the next day and the wife's taking care of the kid. I want to say it was the first or second week that we had my daughter, and she shit everywhere. And I'm sleeping. My wife comes in the room and she's like super calm about it. She's like, "Hey, she shit everywhere. Can you get up and like help me clean stuff?" And I like spring out of bed. I hurry up, get up, take her, and start like cleaning stuff up. And she was like, "You didn't have to like rush." I'm like, "Well, you woke me up." So I mean, I assumed it was like
it's go time.
It's go time. Like if you're waking me up, or if I see you look concerned, it's like I'm not thinking twice about this. This is like whatever needs to get done is going to get done. And she's like alarmed when the dad instinct essentially kicks in. It's like, "Oh, no, this is like fight or flight." So it's just such a cool experience. And if people are ever on the edge, I think do it and make sure your relationship's solid first, but also like I wish I had kids sooner at this point.
How old are you?
I'm 31.
Okay.
And my wife is 29. So I'm looking at it. I'm like, yeah, I wish we had kids sooner because my parents are 56. And I know that my grandparents passed away at 15 and 17 on my dad's side. My mom's parents were long gone before I was even thought of. And like, all I can think about is how much I loved my grandfather. And to this day, I still think, Like, man, what I wouldn't give for just another day to just sit down at the restaurant and talk to them. This little breakfast restaurant that we went to all the time that's been open since 1923, still to this day, only takes cash. What I wouldn't give to just sit down and tell him, "Hey, Pap, this is who I am today. This is what I'm doing," and just to get his input because I'll never know. So it sounds like sad, but like I want my daughter to have that experience with her grandparents, and she does very much so love all of her grandparents, even like our step parents and everything. So we have a very very good situation. I didn't necessarily come on to talk about
No,
kid stuff,
that's a
but it
big
just came
topic.
to mind. Yeah,
I didn't have specific stuff we needed to
yeah,
address today, so that's a
yeah,
big, beautiful topic if there's
mhm,
such thing as one.
yeah.
Um, to continue with that, how thankful are you? It's probably difficult to have this perspective, but that you take care of yourself. You lift weights, you take your health very seriously. You sprung out of bed
Mhm.
ready to clean up that shit. Okay.
Yeah.
Imagine if you were, overweight, sluggish, you ate like
Mhm.
shit, felt like shit all the time. I would guess that would be a little more difficult.
Yeah, and this is something that I've thought about ever since I was younger too. Like I feel better at 31 than I did at like 19 to 23. And ever since then, I've really been kind of like I would say definitely over like the last year in particular, I've started to kind of like experiment a little bit more with like stuff that I didn't do, but like, for a little bit of my health history, and I don't know if we laid this out on the last show we did, it was a couple years ago now. So
Regardless, revisit it.
oh, yeah, sure, sure, sure. So, when I first met my wife, and this isn't necessarily all due to her, but she kinda, like, planted the seed in my brain, of which expanded and then got me way down the rabbit hole on health. So, I remember her texting me saying, "Hey, I think I'm gonna go gluten-free because, I seem to have real bad, like, issues with my stomach and other stuff whenever I eat gluten, so I'm just not gonna eat it anymore." And I'm like, "Okay, well, fuck it. I'll do it too. Why not?" So I started to watch what I ate, and I was eating almost similar to how I'm eating now, but without like tracking as much and being very, very thorough and like weighing stuff out and being very mindful of what I eat, my fiber intake, my protein intake, and stuff like that. I was eating a lot of processed food and like full fat dressing, full fat dairy, and stuff like that. And I was always bloated. I had, all sorts of aches and pains. And I was like, okay, this is just like, I'm 23 now, so I'm getting older, and I think it's just part of like being an automotive technician and getting older is just you're gonna have pains and those don't go away. So I remember watching and hearing Jordan Peterson and Michaela Peterson talk about the carnivore diet. And I'm like, okay, well, fuck it. I love animal protein. So I'm just gonna try this for like a weekend and see what happens. Tried it for a weekend. I'm like, holy crap, I have no bloating, my stomach's flat, I feel a lot better. So I'm like, all right, whatever. I'm gonna go back to eating how I ate. So I think I had a salad with full fat Italian dressing, and I just remember my stomach felt awful after that. I'm like, okay, well, fuck it, I'll do the carnivore diet. I do the carnivore diet for I would say the better part of 2 years, from about 2018 to 2020, and, or no, it might have been like 2021. Yeah, it was 2021 because it was when I worked at my job now. So, I remember I would have lots of binging episodes. So, like, I would be really good throughout the week and then face down to cheesecake. We'd go to Dairy Queen, I'd get a Blizzard, and I felt awful about myself every single time. And this is like a pattern of disordered eating. And there's a difference between disordered eating and eating disorders. And what a lot of people actually don't understand is that like disordered eating can lead you to eating disorder, and a eating disorder is actually the deadliest mental health illness you could have. And I know this sounds like super like lefty sensitive stuff, but like it's a real deal thing because 1 in 5 people, so 20% of people who have an eating disorder will die as a consequence of that eating disorder. So this is why it's kind of like important to have these kind of talks about the way people interact with food and understand food, because it's not like food is something that we just eat and move on with. We're very like social creatures. So, and I'm sure you know this as well. Like, specifically like being in BJJ and stuff like that, where you do like a lot of physical fitness stuff. What do we like to do with our boys? We like to go out, get pizza, go eat, drink beer, act like assholes, stuff like that. We have a lot of like social conventions around food and alcohol, and nobody really thinks about this kind of stuff. I never thought about it until I would say maybe like 2 or 3 years ago. So because every event you go to is going to have food, every party you go to has alcohol, every work gathering you have, what do? We order pizza for everybody, and like all of these things are fine. But if you're somebody who has problems feeling full, or like a problemed relationship with food like I have or had, then this can be really difficult for you because you're going to put on weight. And, obviously we know that obesity leads to all sorts of bad health outcomes later on down the line. So, to get back on topic, I was binging a lot. And that's how you really go down a bad road, is when you can't have a positive relationship with food and understand, like, okay, well, I can enjoy a cheesecake, I can enjoy ice cream, I can enjoy whatever, but I have to enjoy that within the context of, like, I understand that this is like a hedonistic treat that I'm not going to feel bad about. I'm going to enjoy this moment right now, with my wife, with my kid. We're at the boardwalk on the beach or something like that. And we want to go get ice cream at the, Dumpsters Dairy Lane or something like down Ocean City, which is awesome. I'm going to enjoy that, but I'm not going to feel bad about it. I'm going to understand this is a deviation off from my diet, and I'm going to just accept that. And I'm not going to go run 5 miles afterwards because I feel like an awful person. I'm just going to accept this and move on. This is a very tricky thing for a lot of people. And it was a tricky thing for me for a long time, but this is kind of where I eventually moved over into like flexible dieting. Flexible dieting was very helpful for me because I could have what I wanted, but still maintain my overall body composition goals. So I know I kind of like went through a lot there, but I want to like turn it over to you so that way I don't just keep ranting and
No,
raving
no,
here.
that all is resonating with me big time. I
Yeah.
think that type of a diet, those types of habits,
Mhm.
um, allow you to, when you do have that little bit of a binge, you're even
Right.
more aware of, yeah, it did
Mhm.
make me feel a little shittier. That's okay. I'm
Yeah.
going to get back on it tomorrow. I'm not going to beat
Bingo.
myself up over it too much. You acknowledge, that wasn't the same feeling I get when I eat real clean, right?
Right.
It's okay. I'll deal with it instead of kind of being in a constant state of
Yeah.
just kind of sloppy sludge feeling, which I've
Yeah.
certainly been there myself too. So I'm with you.
Yeah, and I did that for pretty much the entirety of the time I was on the carnivore diet, and, um, I should say, like, the carnivore diet is an effective way for weight loss, but knowing what I know now, I would have went another path, and I realize it's not optimal because, um, I hate the term superfood because it's so overused, and there are no real superfoods. I kinda look at, like, nutrition as like a spectrum, right? You have your satiating, healthy, nutrient dense foods over on this side, and you have like hedonistic, enjoyable, tastes really good treats. And like everything's going to fall on a spectrum here, right? So, like your lean meats, your fruits and vegetables are over on this side, where it's like, hey, this stuff is very nutrient dense, it's satisfying, and it's going to check off a box on like achieving a more, like a better body composition. Whatever health goal is there, those foods are going to help achieve that. Now, when we start looking over here, we have like alcohol, ice cream, hyper palatable foods, which are okay. And you can have them essentially whenever you want, but you just need to be mindful of that consumption or find a way that you can have it or find the restriction that feels most comfortable for you so that way you could still enjoy this stuff. So, like, what I always used to do last couple of years, if my wife and I were planning like a nice dinner out, like we just went to Morton's the Steakhouse last Sunday, and it was the first time we ever like dropped our daughter off and went to a dinner by ourselves, which is it was cool. And like the waitress there was super cool too. My mom absolutely loved it. So um she was the one watching our daughter. Um that day I was very, very judicious about how I like worked my nutrition. So in the morning, I'll normally make like protein pancakes or something like that. So instead of using like full like two whole eggs, I used egg whites instead. Instead of like putting in a little bit of chocolate chips, didn't put any of that in there. Like just maneuvered things and like for lunch, maybe had a little bit more like lean meats or something like that. Ate a little bit more judiciously out the day and restricted my calories throughout the day. So that way when we went to dinner, I could have the cream corn. I could have the what the hell was it? The dessert. Oh god, I can't believe it's escaping me right now. But it's like the pudding with like a hard top on it. We had filet and New York strip. I had in two
Creme
old
brulee.
fashions. Cream brulee. Thank you. Yes. So I could have cream brulee with my wife on a
Man, that's
nice
just
dinner.
making me hungry. Holy
Yeah.
shit.
Well, well,
That
yeah.
sounds amazing.
My calories for the day are 2,200, but I still had creme brulee at the end of the day and a wonderful dinner with my wife, right? You can do these things. And this is like the problem with like the low carb world where I see them do a lot of this like black and white thinking. I'm like, guys, it's okay. Like, I remember in these carnivore groups, there'd be people like, okay, so I had a whole stick of butter in my coffee, I had a whole pound of brisket for lunch, and then I had 3/4 of a pound of ground beef with bacon for dinner. But I binged and I had two blueberries and I gained 3 pounds the next day. Is it the two blueberries? I'm like, guys, it's like the 1,700 calories of fat that you just ate all that food has to go somewhere, regardless if it's fat, carbs, or protein. It all has to go somewhere. So guess what? If you're eating all that butter and fat and whatever low carb stuff, if you make these fat bombs with coconut oil and MCT oil or whatever, um, that still is calories. There's nothing wrong with a low carb diet, but just understand it's not a panacea because at the end of the day, it still is energy balance. As much as people don't like to hear that, you can have pretty much whatever you want, but if you eat more, nutrient dense whole foods, you're probably going to feel better than if you just eat ice cream and protein bars all day, or basically make pop tarts with Greek yogurt and protein powder. Like I said, there's a big spectrum here, and you can have foods all along that spectrum, but ideally the bulk of your diet is over on this side of the spectrum with lean meats, fibrous vegetables, fruits, all that kind of stuff, even like potatoes and stuff like that, because those are very satiating. Hopefully you're all on this side, and then maybe like 15-20% you're over on this side where you just really enjoy what you're eating. And I really try to like pull people back from the edge of just being so black and white about their nutrition, because that's what really fucks people up, is just they get in this never-ending loop of, oh my God, I had a little bit of seed oil, so now I'm just gonna die. I'm like, guys, relax. Seed oils are fine. Anybody that's still freaking out about seed oils, I promise you they have never read any human literature on them, because canola oil is actually more cardioprotective than olive oil, and there's so much data to back this up. And olive oil is fine too. I used to be of the mind that saturated fat, it didn't matter. LDL cholesterol didn't matter as long as your HDL was high. But over time, I've changed my mind on that, because there's Mendelian randomization trials where they basically plot people's LDL cholesterol. They take two people of like very, very similar phenotypes, and they monitor their LDL cholesterol over a lifetime. And they find universally every single person who has higher LDL over a lifetime has disproportionately more cardiovascular disease. Am I telling you if you have a LDL of 140 that you should just like go vegan? No, but just understand that a lifetime exposure of higher LDL cholesterol does lead to more cardiovascular disease. Higher LDL is necessary but not sufficient for heart disease. So there's all these levers you could pull to kind of adjust your nutrition, and I just try to always get people in the mindset of like, any diet works when strictly adhered to, and you probably want to at least include everything or something from all food groups, because they're all beneficial in their own ways.
How important do you think it is? You lift weights every day?
I work out about 4 days a week pretty hard, but I
Okay.
do some form of like walking or something like that almost every day. Yeah.
How important do you think it is when it counts for your diet and being able to deal with maybe having a day where you eat a little bit shittier than normal? The fact that you are, in fact, burning. I mean, when you're lifting your heavy weights, Kyle, you're probably burning a shitload of calories. How important do you think that is?
I think that's incredibly important. And what what I want to stress to people when it comes to lifting weights is that it's not always necessarily like the amount of weight or when you're working out. Like, that's the stimulus. It's everything around it. So like your sleep and nutrition that allows you to lay that solid foundation, and then you can burn more calories later on, because muscle is very energy dense. Your body wants to use a lot of calories to keep all the muscle on you. And not only that, when you're jacked, you feel better, you look better. There's a saying from a company here in Pennsylvania called oh God, I can't believe I'm like so many brain. Oh, All American Roughneck. I really like that clothing company, and it's based out of like right around my neck of the woods. Like, the owner of the company literally lives in this town that I live in now. I don't know if he lives here anymore, but I know he's from around here. They always say look good naked. They own Axe and Sledge as well. So like Axe and Sledge and All American Roughneck are kind of like these sister companies that are really, really awesome. And that's like the thing. You always want to look good naked, and eating more protein and being physically active, you'll look good naked, more often than not if you can get those two things dialed in. And not only that, like, I didn't realize how much better I could feel. And one thing that really cleared up for me once I lost a lot of weight was like suicidal ideation. So I would never claim to be depressed or anything like that. I was never formally diagnosed, but like, I did have suicidal thoughts a lot, even when like things were going good. It was just always this thing that always came up in my mind. And I've heard people explain this, and I'm not like a genius on nutrition. I know my way around more than the average person, but if you have excess adipose tissue, which is fat tissue, then that can create inflammatory cytokines, which are basically little cells in your body that can cause inflammation, and some of that inflammation can get in your brain, which causes issues in your brain, which could be suicidal ideation, depression, or things like that. Um, and I think honestly, when I had excess adipose tissue when I was 250 pounds at
Jeez.
5'11 tall, um I think that was probably what a lot of that was, is just like the back pain, the bloating, all this stuff was largely because of excess adipose tissue. And once I lost it, it's like, holy crap, like I'm happy all the time. And now, especially with like my daughter, I experience moments of like pure joy very, very frequently. So we were talking a little bit off air about like doing podcasting and everything like that. And like I think about this, I try to think about it as much as possible. My job, work with absolutely phenomenal people and a boss who has worked to make sure that he got me a raise whenever I asked for one. My band, we're like best friends. We've gone on vacation together. We go out on their boat all the time and just have a grand old time. And I think our music kicks ass. And that is in small part to me, but like all the other members of the band are just absolutely phenomenal people. Love them all. My family. I saw my mom. I don't want to get too personal on this, but like my mom had a lot of issues in my early childhood. And now I feel like I have my mom back because now she finally decides she wants to be there for her daughter. My wife is a wonderful mother to her mom. It sounds like I'm sitting here patting myself on the back, but like just beyond words grateful to have all the people in my life that I do. And also that I get to do stuff like this with people like
Mm.
you. But like, it's just, I experience moments of pure joy that I never experienced when I was heavier. And if I could give that to people, I would do it 10 times out of 10. But you know just as well as I do that this is something that like you have to work for. Like when you lose weight, I have a friend, and I think you probably know him as well, Adam Fitzgerald. Um, he did my podcast years ago,
Mhm.
and we just started bullshitting after about nutrition and stuff. And I remember him messaging me afterwards, like, "Hey man, you changed." He said, like, "You changed my mind on the way that I eat," and he lost something crazy, like 80 pounds or something like that. So he just kicking ass, and he still messages me every here and there. I haven't talked to him. I should get him back on the show sometime. But yeah, it just like changed his life. And everybody who goes through weight loss, I think, feels that, or at least I hope they do, because like that's so worth just struggling a little bit and realizing like, ah, no, I got to put the fork down. I'm going to be a little bit hungry right now. But like, man, the feeling you get once you're finally kind of free of like that excess fat or inflammation and feeling good. I feel like that's like a birthright. Like all humans should feel that. And it takes a little bit of work, but once you're there, it's to me beyond worth it.
You touched a little bit on, your, I guess we'll say libertarian, podcasting world, your online presence, things like
Yeah.
that. Could you, if someone's listening and they're not familiar with who is Kyle, could you walk us down that path? Did you
Ooh,
grow up a libertarian? Were you born a Ron Paulian, or how did that work?
man, that's such an interesting story because like I look back at my arc now and I'm like, man, I was it's it was pretty linear. So I always was a little bit more right leaning, right? Like my brother was a shit lib essentially. Like his one of his some of his favorite channels on YouTube way, 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 way back in the day. He doesn't feel this way anymore, but like um the two I remember were like the Amazing Atheist and the Young Turks. Now, like nowadays, I agree with the Young Turks on some things, but obviously disagree with them on other things. My brother always called himself a liberal back then, and then one day he said he's a libertarian. I'm like, well, whatever. So he started showing me like Stefan Molyneux was probably one of the first ones, Larry Sharp, Eric July, Austin Peterson, and then I started listening to a lot of them. And like Stefan Molyneux is probably the one that sticks out the most. And over time, I was really convinced by like the anarcho-capitalist arguments. Um, I probably consider myself a narco-capitalist for the better part of 10 years. And like in an ideal world, that would be the system we live under. We don't live in an ideal world. And I've changed my mind, I would say, probably in the last 2 or 3 years, especially after having a daughter and kind of seeing the way that the world is now, that I would say I'm a little bit more of like a minarchist, right? Like the functions that I would have the government do would basically be border security, ensuring there is no such thing as abortion, and enforcing, I don't want to say necessarily cultural norms, but kind of making sure that there's some degree of order in society, which that sounds pretty ambiguous, but things where we begin to get into excess, like, and this is probably gonna hurt some people's feelings, and I'm okay with that, but like transgenderism, I do think that if even adults were to decide that they wanted to remove parts of their body, I don't think people should be allowed to do that because I think that's literally human mutilation, and specifically children as well. Like I do believe that children need to be defended and protected at all costs. And if you don't have some kind of protection mechanism for children, then I don't think you can really have any kind of prosperous society, because those are like the most vulnerable people among us. And I feel this way all the more ever since having a daughter, because it's like, okay, well, people who would abort children, like abortion is a very, very big thing for me. I'm as pro-life as it gets. Um, I do believe that's a life from conception. And,
Is
we
that a
could talk about,
religious conviction you have?
I'm actually not religious. I consider myself an agnostic, but I do feel like that is a the way that I came to kind of like a pro-life stance was, I do believe that sex is a choice, right? So to go real quick to like the exception thing, where two people consent to having sex, and even if they're drunk or whatever, they still consent to having sex. That does not give you the right to murder something because you felt like you made a mistake, right? Now, when it comes to rape or incest or the life of the mother, then I do believe, okay, well, this should be kind of like a as soon as possible deal, because you didn't choose to have that child. If you didn't choose to have a child, then I don't think it's right to tell somebody that they have to carry that to term. If you choose to carry that to term, then like my heart goes out to you. You're an absolutely wonderful person. But if somebody, once again, didn't choose that, I have a hard time saying like you should have to carry that to term. Um, I believe life is a very, very precious gift. And I do believe, especially as like with the world that we have today, specifically like in America, which I do think has the potential to be the greatest country in the world, I do believe that it is upon us that we pay that gift forward, right? I enjoy my life very much, therefore I want my daughter to enjoy her life. I hope she chooses to have kids as well. Obviously, I can't make her do that, but like, basically, I would describe myself as like a minarchist with kind of like right wing conservative tendencies. That's kind of where I'm at now. And it was more of like my brother and then some of the content that he introduced me to that really convinced me to be kind of like essentially like a Ron Paul kind of guy.
And your brother's still kind of all about that life?
Yeah, I would say he's probably a little bit more anarchist than I am. I'm a little bit more, like I said, on the is probably a lot of libertarians would say status side. But like I said, I'm okay with that. I do believe there is some modicum of order that's necessary to maintain a society that we would want to live in, and also our kids would want to live in. And reasonable people can disagree about this kind of stuff as well.
So you're more of a minarchist, pro-life type on the right. So that means you're a big fan of the Trump and Vance administration. Is that right? What?
No. It's funny because I have people call me a liberal, and it's like, okay, well, if we went down like issue by issue, my biggest issue is obviously anti-war, right? Because the worst thing that the government does is mass murder campaigns, and this is why I particularly focus on like the coming Cold War with China, or like the essentially like the what they call the pivot to Asia, which was done in 2011 under Barack Obama, where now instead of doing terror wars, we're now moving over to trying to what they call great power competition between China, Russia, and Iran. The reason why I don't like the Trump and Vance administration, and anybody that looks at my Twitter or watch my podcast can glean this from me pretty quick, is because I feel like they're actually not right wing enough. Um, Vance is a competent speaker, but I'm also very concerned about his connections to Peter Thiel and some of the PayPal mafia, and also the fact that he's a huge China hawk. Because I believe that a lot of the stuff that we hear about China is it's just not. I believe I know a lot of it's a lie. Trump also is essentially like a center left kind of guy. I don't agree with his policies. And then he essentially, like, his campaign promises were actually good, like bring back manufacturing, pro life. I like that. Reining in inflation, mass deportations, and limiting immigration. I'm all about a lot of that stuff. But the fact is that he's not all about that stuff. He campaigns like he is, but then he's ultimately not.
He
Um,
also campaigned about releasing all of the Epstein files, I think.
Yes, yes, exactly. And the most transparent campaign ever, or the most transparent administration ever, and then also like Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency, or to get rid of all these government departments. I liked a lot of that stuff. It's just I think you were in the same boat where it's like, oh, he's lying. Surprise, everybody. Campaigning politicians lie, and they lie a lot. Trump is no exception to this. And like the fact that people believe Trump I'm like, we lived through 4 years of Trump. We know what he's going to do. And people say, oh, he's different this time. Why? Based on what? Why would you assume he's any different than he was before? And then, shocker, I hate to say this, but I was vindicated that, yeah, it's just like Trump the first go around. And there were a lot of people that really wanted to vote for Trump because he was going to end the war in Ukraine in a day. I called that that wasn't going to happen because when he was asked about this, and I tried to find this interview and I wish I could find it, but I remember him basically saying, like, laying out strategic ambiguity, which, for those who may not be familiar, strategic ambiguity refers to like the relationship of China, Taiwan, and the US, where basically the US tells Taiwan, don't declare independence because you don't know if we'll come to back you. And China, don't go take Taiwan because you don't know if we'll back Taiwan, which actually, like, if you're looking at like a geopolitical strategy, that's not a bad strategy. My opinion is that, the same as the State Department essentially, which is that Taiwan is part of China. I hate to say it, but it is kind of like might makes right. And we all recognize that Taiwan's part of China. If China wanted to take Taiwan, they could, and we couldn't stop them because it's 70 miles off their coast. And those people, like both Taiwanese and Chinese, look at each other as like family because they essentially are, right? Like a lot that's like essentially the same people. So but basically Trump said that his policy on Ukraine would be, I'll tell Russia, I'll give Ukraine more weapons than they've ever gotten, and I'll tell Ukraine that, like, you better stop messing around or else I'm going to cut you off. Well, shocker, here we are a year or what, 13, 14 months in the Trump administration, and we're essentially more entangled in Ukraine now than we were under Joe Biden. More sanctions, more weapons, more intelligence, a mineral deal now. And now they're talking about NATO style Article 5 guarantees for Ukraine because of Marco Rubio, and Trump's floating this out. And he was literally telling when everybody said that Trump and Vance like laid down the law with Zelensky. I'm sure you remember that whole episode last year. What everybody missed was the first 40 minutes where Trump was saying he'll give him security guarantees. And like essentially Trump, the worst thing about Trump is that he really neutered all the right-wing resistance to the worst things that Joe Biden did, right? Because nobody really cares about Israel and Gaza anymore. Well, I shouldn't say nobody cares about it, but like the right-wingers really aren't up in arms about it. They're definitely not up in arms about Ukraine and Russia anymore, when that's like we're flirting with the country with the biggest nuclear arsenal in the history of the world. And all it would take is essentially a phone call, like telling Zelensky, hey, you're done. The CIA, we're not providing you any more information. We're not providing you any more weapons. No more intelligence. You make a deal now, or else, we're walking away either way. And then, we could get back on to good relationship with Russia. And you see all these stupid plan trusters that are saying like, oh, Russia's begging to get back in the dollar. Not true. They rejected that deal back when they met in Anchorage, Alaska. So Russia's fine. I don't think Russia and China take the US seriously anymore. I think they're kind of looking at the situation being like, yeah, the West is kind of like in decline now, and Russia is not quite as economically prosperous as China, but I think China's kind of looking at the rest of the world now and be like, okay, we can have trade, we can have relations. And like they actually sent aid to both Israel and Gaza, China, that is. I think they're kind of looking at the rest of the world and just be like, okay, well, we're kind of rising in power where like I think it's 89% of people in China own their home outright. Could you imagine that in the US? Well, like the average home buyer in the US now is what, like 58 years old? Like someone like me that's married with a kid at 31, I'm like the vast exception to the rule. So like Trump campaigned on basically making America for people like you and me again. You got a couple kids, I'll have a couple kids, and we want affordable groceries, affordable vehicles, affordable mortgages, and we want no more war. We got none of that. And now Trump's saying he wants house prices to rise. So like Trump is he takes every side of every issue, and he usually comes through on his worst promises and then breaks all his good promises. So I know that's a whole lot, but I just can't stand this idea that like Trump was some savior. And there's still people that are like, trust the plan, bro. What plan are we trusting? There's no plan. The plan is we're going to punish you if you criticize Israel, because Danny Davis, who's one of the greatest foreign policy analysts in the United States, he was going to be in the Trump administration, but guess what? They found out he didn't like Israel. So guess what? He couldn't be part of the administration. Anti-BDS laws, those are up all over the place. They deport people for writing op-eds about Israel. And it's not like that I'm sitting here, brokenhearted over some Afghani that got deported back to Afghanistan or something like that. It's the fact that the government should have no precedence to punish you over criticizing Israel. And that's illegal in 38 states. 38 states, if you criticize Israel as a public sector employee, you could be fined. In South Dakota, you could be punished for just saying like, oh no, I don't believe the Holocaust was like a big deal. And I'm not taking a position on that either way, But in South Dakota, you can be punished for that because of fucking Christine Ohm. So I'm sorry, I know that's a tangent,
You
but
don't
just
want to jump into Holocaust, your exact thoughts on the Holocaust numbers?
I, I haven't looked into it enough, but if I'm
Okay.
being honest, I'm skeptical that it's as bad as we were told.
Okay. You said you think a lot of the narrative related to China is maybe bullshit.
Yes.
If you had to summarize, what do you think the normal narrative of, let's say, a boomer, Fox News watching Republican is about China? They're ripping us off. They're always ripping us off. How would you summarize what their stance is, and why is it you think it's bullshit?
Okay. This is a very, very big topic, and it's probably one of my most passionate ones because once again, this is the war. If you look at the national defense strategy over the last, 15 years, ever since Obama left, and like they changed the national security or national defense strategy just this past year, saying that they're focusing on their own hemisphere, but they still left a lot of stuff in there, basically saying like, oh no, we're still going to fight in the Indo-Pacific, as they call it, which is the South China Sea, and we're still going to basically build up against Russia as well. So I'm thinking about some of my coworkers who are probably in their 50s, right? Automotive technicians, blue collar guys, wonderful people, love their families, love their country. People that I would go out and I'd buy their kids Christmas presents, right? Like people that mean a lot to me. What they hear from Sean Hannity or the Hodge twins or Charlie Kirk, even, they hear that China's ripping us off because they're sending us all these cheap, unreliable goods that are junk. They're buying up all the farmland in the US and they're going to take over the world. And they own the Democrat Party, right? Because Beijing Biden and things like that. So that would kind of be loosely the narrative that we hear. And also, they're sending over fentanyl in the United States to poison Americans through Mexico. Okay, let's kind of walk through this one by one. And my friend Tommy Salmons, who's just one of the most wonderful people you'll ever talk to, he runs the Year Zero podcast. If you ever talk to him, I definitely think you should have him on because he's just, like I said, one of the best people you ever talk to. He kind of views it a little bit this way. And I think a lot of people's view on China, specifically like the older generations, it's about 30 years behind, right? Oh, and they also use slave labor. That's another thing. Um, okay, so let's start with they're ripping us off. Okay, they're sending us now reliable goods. And like Steve Jobs even said this. He said, I don't build over in China because it's cheaper. That's where all of like the talent and the technology is. Do I think we could bring all that manufacturing back to America and do it? Yeah, but it's going to take some time, right? Because we haven't flexed that muscle in a long time. The US doesn't have a manufacturing base like it used to, which is why I'm kind of against tariffs. Because if you have tariffs and you have a manufacturing base, okay, that's fine to incentivize local consumption. But if you don't have the manufacturing base and you're just applying tariffs, then now you're just punishing people all the way around. It makes no sense. Right. And I've gotten arguments with people about this, but yeah, if you have a local consumption base or a manufacturing base, okay, fine, tariffs or whatever. I still don't really agree with them, but we've had 10 years of tariffs now, and manufacturing jobs have only gone away. So I think it's pretty safe to say tariffs aren't working. Okay, that's step one. And we get cheap, reliable goods from them now at this point. If you look back 30 years ago, okay, sure. But like BYD, they outsold Tesla, and that's China's electric vehicles. Like they're doing really, 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 really well. And if you look up on TikTok and see the videos of them, they're awesome. I'm jealous. I mean, I'm an EV certified technician through General Motors. Um, I would love to have a BYD here in America, but the problem is they would destroy our market because they're so cheap. China can make them for so much cheaper than we can. And like,
How much would it be in US dollars if they could be here, you think,
I think I want to say around like $15,000 to $30,000
for a real good electric car?
for like a very good, way bigger range. Like I think their range is like 400 miles, and like a
Wow.
loaded one, you could probably get like a loaded BYD for I think it's like $36,000 US.
Jeez.
Whereas like an EV through GM, if you want to get like the EV Hummer, which I'm enamored with the EV Hummer, that's like 98 to $120,000. So that puts that in perspective. And for like a cheaper EV through General Motors, like let's say you want to get like the Cadillac Optic, that's like a smaller car, or not like a car, but like a smaller crossover. I want to say that's about 50 to $70,000. So it's a Cadillac, and that's like actually not bad for a Cadillac, but still, you can't compare. It's apples and oranges at this point. BYD would just blow them out of the market. So we actually get pretty good technology from China, and like the quality of goods from China has increased so much over the last 30 years. They're buying up all the farmland. This is like you could Google search this, and this would take you like seconds to debunk. They own less than a fraction of 1% of all the farmland in the United States. Canada, Italy, France, Israel, all these countries own way more farmland than China does. And if you want to get conspiratorial, Bill Gates owns more farmland than China does. China owns, I think it's about 750,000 acres, and it went up in about 2013 or 14 when they bought a pork company called Smithfield. And that's when it went from like, I want to say 400,000 to 750,000. Those numbers may not be perfect, but if you look it up, the amount of farmland that China owns in the United States is like infinitesimally small. It's so small, it's like a rounding error of the amount of farmland they own in the United States. And people say, oh, well, they're on military bases. Yeah, farms are around military bases. I hate to break it to you, but that's what it is. Um, Another claim that gets thrown out a lot is the Uyghur genocide. Okay, so this may take a little bit to debunk, but I want to try to be as quick as possible. The Uyghurs are a Muslim group that came from Syria, and they were actually at one point being trained by the CIA, essentially. And there is a company called a cult called the Falun Gong, and they're funded through the National Endowment for Democracy, and they actually run a company called the Epic Times, who gets money from the CIA. Larry Elder is part of the Epic Times. They literally get money from the National Endowment for Democracy.
Larry Elder or Ellison?
Larry Elder, like the old black dude.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, he actually receives money from the national. Well, essentially, his network, his show is on the Epic Times, which is literally a cutout of the National Endowment for Democracy.
Interesting. Okay.
So the Falun Gong is a dissident cult in China, and they're made up of the Uyghurs. And there was I think he was not an astronomer. I can't remember what this guy's a stenographer. I think he was a guy named Adrian Zenz, who did a numerical error on the amount of IEDs, so like the birth control devices inserted into women in the Xinjiang province where all the Uyghurs live, and he multiplied the amount of these birth devices, like anti-birth devices, essentially like birth control, that were inserted into the women. He was off by a factor of 10 and then used that to claim that the Uyghurs were being genocided in Xinjiang province in China. Well, actually, he had to issue a retraction on that statement because he was so wrong about it. And I've had plenty of people on my show, my buddy Jason Smith, Carl Zaw, and Q Anthony Ali, and also Patrick McFarlane. All these guys have like thoroughly debunked this stuff. And also Max Blumenthal has also talked about this a lot. So there's no Uyghur genocide. There's no claim, or there's claims of it, but there's no evidence of it. And everybody that I know that's been to the Xinjiang province actually said that like they're doing really, really well there. So the other thing is about them supposedly controlling the Democrat Party. Okay, Joe Biden, everybody knows this about Joe Biden. He'll take money from anybody, right? I mean, he's taken money from, all the credit card companies. He's the largest recipient of APAC money in US history, actually.
Still probably, even though he's out of office.
Yeah, he received, I think it was $8 million from APAC specifically. So like, and you could look this up on Open Secrets, and like the top people who receive money from APAC are Democrats. It's not even Republicans. But my friend Sam Urban always pushes back on this and says like it's an ideological thing. Republicans are just very pro-Israel. And obviously Democrats are too. But so Joe Biden received, it was like some shady backroom deal money from China. Through some company in Beijing. And people always get this mixed up. People say, oh, they're all CCP spies. Everybody from China is a CCP spy. And they're actually saying it wrong because it's the Communist Party of China. It's not the CCP, it's the CPC. Joe Biden was actually the most hawkish president on China that we've had. Like Trump has actually been less hawkish on China than Biden was, which is kind of a surprise to me because like a lot of the people underneath Trump are like major China hawks. Kamala Harris re-upped the defense agreements in the Philippines, which basically said like if China fucks around in Second Thomas Shoal and some of the reefs that are disputed between the Philippines and China, we would go to war with China over reefs in the Philippines. Joe Biden also had troops stationed in the Kinmen Islands, which is like just a couple miles away from major cities in China. They sailed warships through the Taiwan Strait to the tune of about one a month. There were plenty of like spy planes that flew over the Chinese coast as well. He said multiple times that we would defend Taiwan if China invaded them. And really, like Anthony Blinken and Joe Biden both said that, like, basically, like, yeah, Trump got China right in his first administration. So, and he also had all these arms sales to Taiwan. But now, fast forward to the Trump administration had just authored like the largest aid package or weapons sales to Taiwan, the tune of $11 billion, or no, it was 11 or $13 billion to Taiwan, just like a couple months ago. So, but Joe Biden was very hawkish on China, and that was kind of like his main thing. Is like he really believed in this whole pivot to Asia. And once again, the pivot to Asia was done under Barack Obama, whose vice president was Joe Biden. So the idea that Democrats are like soft on China, no, they were very, very hawkish. And like, this is what people don't understand. And like, this kind of works both ways because, like, if you think about Russiagate, in turn, I did a whole podcast on this where Trump was very hawkish on Russia. He threw out Russian diplomats. He tore up open skies treaties. And like the current nuclear arms treaty, New START, had just expired under Trump. And now there's no, limits on the amount of nuclear, not nuclear subs, but like nuclear arms that could be out or tested or anything like that between Russia and the US. Trump was the first president to send anti-tank Javelin missiles into Ukraine. He brags about it still to this day. So you see how this kind of works like hand in glove, and where like it's almost cringy to say the duopoly, but really they kind of work hand in hand where like, okay, Joe Biden's too weak on China. Well, actually, no, he wasn't. Trump is too soft on Russia. No, he wasn't. So like you get like this circular firing squad where basically like tensions get ratcheted up on all ends from both parties.
So anytime you hear someone more so on the right kind of talk about the fear of China, in your opinion, pretty much bullshit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. China has no force projection, and they really don't have a desire for force projection. Like their foreign policy is essentially briefcases and strongly worded letters to the US. They basically say like, "Hey, US, don't do that." Whereas like the US is like, "Yeah, fuck you. We'll go to war with you over some reefs. We're going to arm Taiwan to the teeth. We're going to arm Japan to the teeth." Like, okay, so this is another Joe Biden project of like getting Japan to boost their military spending by double by, last year in order to help fend off China. Like he also sent nuclear submarines to South Korea and had also sent more nuclear or more weapons to Australia because their whole deal is like the AUKUS pact. So like Australia, UK, and the US are like this pact that's supposed to be formed specifically against China. But yeah, China really doesn't have the desire to like fight a war with anybody. They haven't fought a war since like 1972, I think it was. That was their last war. Whereas like the US, we're fighting wars all the fucking time. And like people were saying, oh, they're all over Latin America. Okay, they pay for infrastructure and they have trade relations with those countries down there. Like, if you really have a problem with it, why don't we go down there? And like, Trump could do this too. Like, hey, Venezuela, I know you're fucking around with China. Why don't you knock that shit off? We're going to give you a better deal. We're going to import all your gas to the US. We're going to give you people to work down there. We're going to lift all the sanctions off of you, but we want to have access to your oil and we'll give you access to our markets. We can exchange food and culture and all this stuff. Like, it'd be awesome. We would love to do that. But instead, we go kidnap their president and firebomb a majorly Catholic city. And like, there's right wingers celebrating this. That's fucking disgusting. They dropped a bomb on an apartment building and killed like probably like 6 or 7 dozen civilians. So I'm sorry, I don't fucking celebrate that. That's what Israelis do. That's what fucking, genocidal Jewish people do over Gaza. And I'm sorry if I believe Americans are better than that. We don't kill Catholics. We don't celebrate the killing of, Catholic civilians. That's disgusting. If you said like, hey, we had some military combatants that were killed and we got Maduro out, I'd still be against it, but I'd be like, it's military casualties. But like firebombing a capital city that is once again 80% Catholic, I'm not celebrating that. And anybody who did is an enemy to humanity.
I heard China is also supplying Cuba with some solar panels, trying to help them with their energy crisis, which is, of course, you could say caused by, our attack and sanctions blockade on Venezuela.
Yes, exactly. And that's essentially what China does. Like that is their whole deal is that, hey, we're going to have good relations with you. Like the main reason why it took them so long, like just recently they're starting to kind of like distance themselves from Israel, is because they don't take stances on conflicts, which like everybody thinks like China's like some malevolent actor. I don't know, man. What would you rather have, debt trap diplomacy or bombs dropped on you? If you ask me, and they don't really do debt trap diplomacy, but that's like what people always say. Down in Africa, they're building infrastructure, they're building hospitals, and like, yeah, you could say that's a way to like trap them into their Belt and Road Initiative, which they're definitely want to get more people on the Belt and Road Initiative. Um, they're building hospitals in these places. The US bombed Somalia 136 times last year, I think it was. And then just last month, they bombed them 29 times, 29 or like 30, like 29, almost 30 times last month. So like I'm sorry if I don't believe we're the moral arbiters of the world when we're bombing the shit out of, one of the poorest countries in the fucking world. Like I don't believe that.
Why are libertarian podcasts, independent media, maybe not always libertarian, Glenn Greenwald, places, independent media? Why is that the only place I ever hear anyone talking about how often the United States bombs Somalia?
I think because it's not really a front and center thing. Like, um, Trump really ramps up drone strikes when he's in office. And like this is so well documented. People have tried to dispute this with me. I'm like, dude, airwars.com. You'll see it. And like the graphs are clear as day. When Trump's in office, they always loosen the rules of engagement and they start bombing places a lot more. Um, Somalia is actually the US's longest war, which I know you've had Dave DeCamp on once or twice, but he's been the one that's been like a hero in covering all this. Um, it's just not really like a front and center thing. AFRICOM doesn't really release a lot of information about it. They'll usually say, hey, we did a couple strikes, but they don't release any casualty numbers. But like we've just bombed the ever living shit out of Somalia for, from what I can tell, like no good reason. They always say it's to fight ISIS in Somalia, like the Al Shabaab government. But like, are we really concerned about like some Somalian pirates? Like the US is like the most defensible country in the world. We have relatively friendly neighbors to the south and to the north, and we have two giant oceans. So like if Somali pirates were to come our way, we could blow them out of the water, no problem. If China, in like I heard Blake Master saying this, that like the Chinese were going to storm the boat or the beaches of California. I'm like, guys, like please get real. Like that's so ridiculous. And even if they were, we could blow them out of the water, no problem. But they have no intentions of doing that. Like Xi always says that he wants good relations with the United States. That he always warns against, the U.S. continuing to pursue this whole hot and cold deal with Taiwan. He always warns against it. But like as far as Somalia goes, I think it's just like a low burning conflict, and basically a way that the arms companies make money is to sell bombs. And so, hey, you need somewhere to drop them. So Somalia's a good place for it. But like I don't know. It makes no sense that we're even doing it because it's, they've been bombing them since I think 2001. Since and there was a coup. I'm foggy on some of these details, but there was an Ethiopian coup back in I want to say 2006, and ever since then the region's just largely been destabilized. So, and like people always used to tell libertarians, I'm sure you've heard this before, go move to Somalia. Well, actually, when Somalia had no government, they were actually doing really well. But then, of course, the US had to go in and coup him, and all that prosperity went away.
The direction of the Republican Party and arguably the country seems to be, I won't say evangelical Christian necessarily, but maybe J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio on the ticket in 2028. They're both call themselves Catholic. So I don't, that's not the same as evangelical, but the kind of Christian nationalist direction we're heading in. You're talking about a lot of bombs we're dropping on a lot of countries. Do you think you'll vote for a J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio ticket in 2028? And do you think that's consistent with what Jesus would want?
Absolutely not. Any ticket with Marco Rubio, because Marco Rubio is really the one that's kind of like doing a lot of the foreign policy stuff in the Trump administration right now. He, in my opinion, is like should be the arch nemesis of libertarians because he's voted for every single war ever since he got in. Every single disastrous policy, other than maybe like Obama bombing Syria or like trying to go after Syria, which Republicans basically universally voted against. Like even DeSantis voted against it. Marco Rubio supported funding Ukraine, all the bombs that are dropped. He's the one that, largely supports the, all the policy down in Latin America. And the one thing I really want to like impress upon right wingers is that Marco Rubio is a first generation immigrant. His parents literally came here off the boat from Cuba. He's lied about his entire background. Like his parents left Cuba before the whole revolution. They weren't thrown out for being communist dissidents. They left the country and came to Florida. And then Marco Rubio was born. down in Miami, and now he represents this large faction of immigrants, and he's doing this all on their behalf. Which, like, to me, the fact that right wingers who claim to care about immigration and immigrants and want to focus on America first are like so gung ho about Marco Rubio, who basically is an anchor baby and is doing this all on the behalf of dissidents and Cuban, Venezuelan, Honduran immigrants. It's just like blows my mind that people like back this. So, and he's also like a big China hawk. And he supported funding Ukraine as well up until like 2024. So the idea that we should support Marco Rubio and even JD Vance supported funding Ukraine pretty early on. Um, in my opinion, no, I would never vote for any ticket that has Marco Rubio on it. I could potentially be convinced for Vance if I really thought that he was a restrainer. But like so far, people keep saying, oh, he's a voice of restraint. Where? Is there any evidence that he ever was a voice of restraint on foreign policy in the Trump administration? Because like he's still talking about bombing Iran. He's celebrating bombing narco traffickers, which there's no evidence that any drugs were coming from Venezuela. They even dropped the Cartel de las Soles charges, which is just like a made up, drug trafficking organization that used to run back in the 90s. But they said Maduro was the head of that organization. That was a lie, and they dropped it. So that's how you know they were even lying about it. And like drugs largely don't come from Venezuela outside of like cocaine. They were claiming fentanyl was coming from Venezuela. There's no evidence of that. Even the Trump administration admitted that back in April of 2025. So, no, I probably couldn't be convinced to vote for Vance, and I would not vote for Marco Rubio. Like, I would considerably vote against Marco Rubio to make sure that he would lose because I think that man should be nowhere near power, and I think he should spend the rest of his life in a walled cell. So, but as far as like religious values go, I do think religion is a good thing, and if we had like a large cultural like Christian revival in the United States where people really got back to kind of what this country was founded on, but in respect of like we love our neighbors, we have
So like Mike
strong
Huckabee.
churches.
So that means you would support Mike Huckabee, right? Mike Huckabee.
Yeah.
He's a preacher.
Yeah, well, if we got to more of like the Christian values that aren't dispensationalist, right? As in like the Eastern Orthodox Christian or Roman Catholic, I'd be okay with that. But like dispensationalism and evangelical Christianity, sorry, um, and Mormonism, like those kind of like wickedly Zionist religious, like that needs to go away. But there's a lot of great like Tommy I was telling you about earlier, who's like who is a Orthodox Christian, or Buck Johnson, who's an Orthodox Christian. I look at those guys like they're anti-Zionist and they're very like conservative and very religious and very serious about their religious values, but they don't seek to like reign that over people. But like if we had strong churches that weren't Zionist churches or largely funded by Zionist organizations, then I'd be okay with that. But that's not what we're going to get. We're going to get the Mike Huckabees of the world,
Well,
which is what we have now.
Zionism only means that Israel has a right to exist, Kyle. That's all it means. So I don't know why you're.
Right.
That's all it means. That's simply
Yeah.
just like every other group, that they're entitled to their right to exist. I don't see why you have a problem with that. What's your beef?
Well, yeah, it's kind of funny because like I actually don't have a problem with Israel existing in its current or in the context that it's a country where Jewish people can reside and feel safe. Okay. Now that I've got that out, what I do have a problem with is the US sending $350 billion to that country to commit a genocide against its neighbors who are very poor and who have no means of defending themselves. If we weren't funding it, I wouldn't like it, but I'd be like, well, that's tragic, but there's nothing that I can do about it. Okay. The problem here is that we have a government that is largely controlled by that little entity over there. And I was told that, oh, Trump has so many problems with Netanyahu. Okay, well, we see that's bullshit. But that little country over there decides what Americans can and can't say. That's ridiculous. There will be right wingers that will seriously tell you about like American sovereignty, but then say, oh, yeah, but we can't have anti Semitism and like anti BDS laws are fine. If you told me that there were like speech laws in the United States that you couldn't criticize the United States government, I'd be like, I don't like it, but at least it's our government. But the fact that you can't criticize the Israeli government without threatening to be fired from your job or be deported if you're an immigrant, like that's absolutely insane. So, but yeah, I'd be perfectly fine if all the Jews in the world wanted to go live in Israel and leave the United States. Go. By all means, go. I don't care. But you don't get my tax dollars. And I don't have to love your country. I don't have to love you as a people. I can look at you as individuals and say, yeah, you guys are fine. But if you're going to essentially what they call themselves have organized Jewry, where you have the World Jewish Congress and the Hebrew Immigration Aid Society and APAC and the Republican Jewish Coalition and all of these what they call organized Jewry around the world, where they basically pull the strings on all these different governments and organizations. I have a problem with that because now you're affecting the way that my country runs. And if Jewish people want to be part of America, I'm okay with that too. But you don't get to have a say where you institutionalize nepotism and benefit your group at the expense of my group. Nobody can have that. We can't have a country where you have any group that chooses to use the taxpayers for their own benefit. The taxpayers should benefit the taxpayers as a whole, not one group, not another group, all taxpayers. If we're going to have this giant system where everybody gets taxed, right? It should go towards defending the country, which we're not really in any concern of that. So we could reduce the Pentagon budget by like 10 times and still be fine. And making sure that like legal disputes are fine, and then having maybe like a small police force or something like that. Like very, very limited government functions are fine, but like we shouldn't have a government that taxes us and then sends money over to Israel and also spends money on a department called the it's so crazy, the anti-Semitism task force that's headed by Leo Terrell, who blocked me on Twitter, which is hilarious. um but Leo Terrell, who runs an anti-Semitism task force, which literally sends people to major cities and college campuses to make sure they're not hurting any Jewish people's feelings, which could be defined as saying like, hey, I don't want to fund Israel. Okay, well, now we're going to crack down on you. And one thing before I throw it back over to you, like, to paint how stark and how serious the government is about defending Israel's reputation, not the state, but their reputation. In 2020, in the summer of love, the summer of George, as we call it, private businesses were burned down, burned to the ground, and police were told to stand down. After the genocide in Gaza broke out after October 7th, 2023, there were kids protesting that peacefully on college campuses, and the government sent the military to break it up. I just want people to ponder that for one moment. If you and I had a private business and it was, broken into and destroyed in 2020, the police basically told you, sorry, we can't do anything. We were told to stand down. But if you protested Israel, they sent the military in after you. Like, how people don't just look at that and be like, what? Zog, Zionist occupied government. Like, that encapsulates that. If you can't criticize that government without fear of having the military on you, then like, I'm sorry, you don't have a country.
What do you think is a bigger problem in the United States, anti-Jewish sentiment or anti-Islam sentiment?
I think neither one is really an issue, but I think anti-Islam is more of a cover to make sure that people don't find out why we have to deal with radical Islam. And it's because we have a essentially Jewish run government, a government that is strictly run basically to benefit the Jewish class.
Why do they, you say the Jewish class or Zionists, why do they want us to dislike Islam?
Well, who's in their region? The Palestinians, the Iranians, which these are all actually different groups. Like the Iranians actually have like an average IQ of like 100 or something like that. They're very well educated, very serious, very diplomatic people. But basically Zionists and Jewish people want us to dislike Muslims because those are their enemies. So if they could get, white Christian men or, even black men to go fight their wars for them, then okay, well, then Jewish people don't have to go die to basically have their little country over there. So they want to basically have us hate their enemies. So that way we don't ever find out that they're fucking around in our country. And like, I'm not advocating for harming anybody. I'm just saying that there is a serious concerted effort by people who just so happen to be Jewish that want us to hate other people because it benefits them.
Kyle, we didn't cover, details about your podcast, more details about your band at the beginning of the episode. If you could give yourself maybe a little commercial before we start the process of wrapping things up, please.
Yeah, well, my name is Kyle Matovcik. I host the In Liberty and Health podcast. I do mostly foreign policy analysis right now. I do have some guests on every here and there, but I've had a lot of great people on: Ron Paul, Dave Smith, Dave DeCamp, pretty much people that I'm sure your listeners would know and love. So if you guys would like, go check that out. I also play in a band called A Common Crown. We just released a song called Slow Down. If you're into like hard rock, metal, I call us alternative metal. I think you'd really, really like us. I think our music kicks ass, and I think that is in small part due to me, but in large part due to the other members of the band. I also co-host a podcast called 5 Till Midnight, airing every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern time. And occasionally, me and my friend Nico House, who is a leftist who lives down in Brazil, we do mostly kind of similar stuff like we talked about today. We usually do streams on Wednesdays, and I think it's a really, really cool thing. We call it political dads, essentially, where both him and I are fathers, and we're kind of talking about this whole journey together. And we also do a lot of political analysis. And it's funny because despite me being kind of like a right-wing libertarian and him being kind of like a far left progressive, we come together on strangely a lot of issues. And I think that's about oh, and I also write on Substack. I do heavy metal, just talk about music stuff. So if anything here was a little bit too hard and heavy for you, if you're into heavy metal music, go check out the Substack, The Great Megalodon, and check out A Common Crown. But other than that, if you like my political perspectives, some of the things I talk about, 5 Till Midnight, In Liberty and Health, and For the People podcast. That's pretty much everything for me, man. And Kelly, it's always great to talk to you, man.
Likewise, Kyle, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much.
For sure.